The Checkpoint, a short story inspired by the egg. Nara heard the scream before the phone even rang. That was the unnerving part. Not the scream itself, but the way her bones reacted to it, like a choir hitting a note they already knew by heart. The call center around her hummed with fluorescent lights and stale coffee. But Nara sat perfectly still, headset balanced, cursor blinking on her screen. The phone icon flashed. She answered, "Customer support. This is Nara. How can I—" The scream split into sobs. A man's voice, older, ragged. He took everything. Please, I don't know what to do." Her script, laminated and taped to the desk, told her exactly what to say in situations like this: empathy, apology, procedure references. Instead, Nara said, "You're in the kitchen. There's a cracked blue mug on the counter by the sink. You're holding the phone with your left hand and bracing yourself on the cabinet with your right. Let go of the cabinet and sit down. Please, you're going to faint if you don't." There was a silence that didn't belong on a call center line. "How did you know that?" he whispered. She didn't know, except she did. For a moment, a flicker like a reflection on glass. She was there. The thin linoleum under bare feet, the chemical sting of spilled cleaning fluid, the weight of 71 years and 100 disappointments pressing against an old man's back. Then she was back in her wheeled office chair, her legs tingling with the ghost of someone else's exhaustion. "Sir," she said softly. "Sit down, please." He did. She could hear the thump of a chair scraping the floor. The rest of the call blurred into normalcy, policy and claims and timelines. But the first few seconds stayed lodged in her like a splinter. It wasn't the first time. The dream started when she was 8. Sometimes she was a boy running across a sun-baked courtyard, a wooden toy clutched in his hand. Sometimes she was a woman in a heavy dress, sweating through fabric as she tried to calm a crying baby. Sometimes she was ancient, bones paper-thin, breath rattling with each inhale. Sometimes she died. She'd wake up gasping, hand on a chest that wasn't riddled with arrows, lungs not full of smoke, skin not carved by frost, just Nara, in a cramped apartment, cheap mattress, walls thin enough to hear the neighbor's TV. Her mother called it an overactive imagination. Her father called it nonsense and insisted she stop talking about it at school. The school counselor called it possible anxiety manifestations and offered breathing exercises printed on pastel paper. None of them felt what she felt, the heavy sense that when she looked into the bathroom mirror, there were 100 people trying to line up with her face. She stopped bringing it up. But it didn't stop happening. By 25, Nara knew things she had no business knowing. She could look at a stranger's hands and tell they'd once played the violin, even if they hadn't in decades. She could hear a foreign language for the first time and feel the grammar slot into place like a puzzle she'd already finished somewhere else. Old battle names, obscure villages, the exact smell before a dust storm, little fragments that didn't fit into one ordinary life. So she did what people do with uncomfortable, unsolvable things. She folded it into the background and kept going. Get up early, take the bus, answer calls, eat instant noodles, sleep badly. Hope that the strange edges of her mind didn't slice too hard against reality. They sliced anyway. The mugging happened on a Tuesday. Nara was walking home, scarf pulled tight against a cold wind, when she turned into an alley she normally avoided. She didn't know why. Later she would tell herself it was just a shortcut, but the truth felt more like a tug on a string that ran through her ribs. The alley smelled like rotting cardboard and damp concrete. Halfway through it, she saw them, a younger woman backed against a graffiti-stained wall, her bag clutched close, a man looming over her with jittery hands and desperate eyes. "Give it," he hissed. "Just give it, come on!" The woman's eyes were wide, too wide. Nara felt something snap into place, a slot machine reel clacking to a stop. She knew those eyes, not from a face like this, not lined with fear in this narrow alley, but from another lifetime entirely, chubby and bright and filled with tears when a wooden spinning top broke in half little brother. The word flared up in a language Nara had never learned. She walked forward before she fully decided to. "Hey," she said. Her voice sounded steady. That was surprising. "Stop!" Both heads whipped toward her. The woman looked hopeful and terrified. The man looked furious at the interruption. Underneath the fury, though, something else flickered. Remorse, shame, a tiredness deeper than his bones. Nara saw, as clearly as if someone had pressed the memory into her palm, a different scene. The same man, younger, sitting at a table with a paper hat on his head, laughing so hard he cried children around him. A cake, a song, a promise he'd made to himself that he wouldn't end up like his father. She knew how the promise had gone. She also knew how this alley could go. A shove, a scream, a bottle broken, skin split. A chain of cause and effect that would echo out in police reports and hospital bills, and children who learned that the world was something that jumped at you with a knife. She was so tired of that version. "Mate," she said quietly, stepping between them, hands empty and open. "You don't want to do this." "You don't know what I want," he spat. "I do," she said. The certainty in her voice surprised all three of them. In a blink, she remembered being him. The first time he stole, the way his heart crashed against his ribs, how his stomach twisted with guilt later, the way the world had told him over and over that he wouldn't be forgiven, that people like him didn't get better. He'd believed it. It had become a script. Nara was very, very tired of that script. "You want to pay the rent," she said softly. "You want the shaking in your hands to stop. You want to be able to look your kid in the eye and not feel like you're made of broken glass, but taking her bag won't do any of that. It'll just keep the shaking going." His fingers spasmed around the strap. "How do you know I've got a kid?" he asked. "Because you still sleep curled on your side, facing the wall," she said. "And when the nightmares get bad, you hum the theme song from that old cartoon with the talking football. You don't know why. It's because you used to watch it with him." His mouth fell open. There are moments when the world feels balanced on a knife edge. This was one. Nara's heart hammered. The alley swapped places with a dozen other scenes. A marketplace where she'd pulled a thief's hand away from a purse and been stabbed. A battlefield where she'd hesitated and lost a friend. A crowded street where she'd walked past and pretended not to see. In too many of those scenes, she'd chosen safety over courage. She took another step closer. "Please," she said. "Just don't be cruel to yourself. You're going to spend a long time regretting it, and you've already had so much regret." He stared at her as if she'd peeled back his skin and was reading the lines inside. Then, like a rubber band that had been stretched too far and finally snapped, his shoulders slumped. He let go of the bag. "Go," he muttered to the woman. "Just go." She bolted. The slap of her footsteps faded toward the street. Nara stayed. The man rubbed his face with both hands. "What are you?" he whispered, tired, she thought, confused. Instead, she said, "Human." He laughed once, bitterly. Then he walked away, disappearing into the maze of side streets, still hunched, but a tiny bit less shattered. Nara stood alone in the alley, shaking now that the moment had passed. She took one step. The world tilted. Later, she would question whether she'd fainted, had a seizure, died, or something else entirely. In the moment, all she knew was that the alley folded in half like a piece of paper, and when it unfolded, she was somewhere else. She stood in a vast room that looked at a glance like a lost and found office had exploded. Shelves towered in every direction, stacked with boxes, jars, suitcases, snow globes, mason jars, clay pots, and unlabeled tins. Some were carved with intricate patterns. Others were plain cardboard tape jobs. They stretched up and up into a soft, sourceless light. Each one had a tag tied to it. Each tag had a name. Nara recognized far too many of them. She turned slowly, heart clanging in her chest. Somewhere between a library and a storage unit, the place smelled like dust and forgotten rain. "Don't touch the heartbreaks," said a voice behind her. "They leak." She spun. A person sat behind a cluttered desk, feet propped up on a pile of mismatched umbrellas. They wore a cardigan that changed colors when she tried to focus on it, and their face was the kind you could pass on the street and forget immediately, even though Nara knew with the same bone-deep certainty as the phone call and the alley that she would never forget it. The person rifled through a stack of papers that seemed to be made of light. "You're early," they said. "Early for what?" Nara asked, clutching her scarf like a lifeline. "For your check-in." They squinted at her. "Nara, current designation, call center, bad knees, recurring dreams of implausible architecture, yes?" "Yes," she said slowly. "What is this place?" "Inventory," the clerk said. "Returns, the sorting room." They shrugged. "Depends who you ask. You know how people are about names." "Am I dead?" They tilted their hand back and forth. Not exactly. Call it a scheduled audit. I should be in an alley, Nara said. I was just in the alley, yes, the clerk said. Threat level medium intervention successful. Good job with the line about the cartoon, by the way. Very on brand for you. For me? She repeated. The clerk gestured around them. You. Nara followed their gesture. Her eyes landed on a nearby shelf. The boxes there were small and simple, made of thin wood. Each one had a tag Kiran, Zhao, Maria, Amadi, Isabel. The names kept going. Her gaze skimmed over languages she didn't know, alphabets she couldn't read. And yet each name landed in her chest with the weight of recognition. She knew exactly how each sounded when called over a field, whispered in the dark, muttered in frustration. These are... Her throat tightened. These are mine. Mm-hmm, said the clerk. So I'm... What? She gestured helplessly at the shelves. All of them. Not at once, they said. That would be a mess. But yes, every one of those lives has been you trying on a particular angle of being. The floor seemed to drift a few inches to the left. No, she said. Yes, said the clerk, not unkindly. That doesn't make sense. Those people lived at different times, different places, different everything. The clerk set down their papers. Their eyes softened. Nara, they said gently, you've felt this your entire life, in your bones, in your dreams, in the way you talk to strangers as if you remember them from somewhere. That's just empathy, she protested. Empathy is remembering how it felt when you were the one crying, they said. You just happen to be remembering very thoroughly. She inhaled slowly. The air in the sorting room felt heavier than normal air, like it was full of untold stories. But why? She asked. The clerk gestured and a ladder creaked into existence, rolling across the nearest shelf. With a casual flick of their wrist, they slid up it as if gravity were more of a suggestion than a law. They plucked one of the thin wooden boxes and glided back down. The tag read Elias. Nara's knees weakened. Open it, the clerk said, handing it over. Her fingers hesitated at the lid. When she'd been 13, there had been a dream, a boy in a fishing village, his hands calloused, his hair sun-bleached and tangled. He'd spent hours on a rocky outcropping staring at the horizon, feeling like there was something just beyond it that he'd forgotten. He'd died at 19 when the storm came in too fast. Nara had woken up choking on seawater that wasn't really there. She opened the box. Inside was not an object, but a feeling, a rush of salt wind against cheeks, the ache of wanting something bigger than a horizon, the cramped warmth of a family cabin, the private guilty relief at the moment the wave hit, the release of no longer needing to choose between staying and leaving. She saw the boy's life unfold from the inside, faster than a thought, slower than a lifetime. She was him. Then she was herself, knees on the sorting room floor, box clutched to her chest. Why? She whispered. It was less a question about this particular life and more about the entire structure of reality. The clerk perched on the edge of the desk, cardigan flickering through colors like a lazy aurora. Because you were small, they said. So small you couldn't explain anything to yourself. We built you a maze of mirrors. We gave you 1,000 ways to bump into yourself. They waved an arm at the shelves. Every time you loved someone, you were practicing loving yourself. Every time you hurt someone, you were practicing hurting yourself. Eventually, even the densest minds start noticing the pattern. Nara's laugh came out strangled. I never noticed. You did, they said. You just called it guilt when you hurt someone, or déjà vu when you recognized them, or tenderness for no reason. You were reading the ripples without knowing you were the one who threw the stone. She put the box back on the floor. Her hands shook. I don't want to have been everyone, she said quietly. Some of those people did terrible things. Yes, said the clerk. I don't want to be them. You aren't them, they said. Not anymore. You were them. You moved through those shapes. You learned what it felt like to be cornered enough to lash out, to be starving enough to steal, to be afraid enough to lie. That doesn't excuse anything, but it explains. Nara closed her eyes. Images surged up, unbidden, hands slapping a child, a knife in the dark, a sentence spoken that could never be unsaid. She flinched away from each one, the reflexive disgust, the urge to say that wasn't me. But under the disgust, something else pulsed, recognition. I don't want to forgive that, she whispered. You don't have to, the clerk said, Forgiveness is just understanding plus time. What you do have to do is decide how you'll act the next time you're holding the sharp end of something. And what if I mess it up again? They smiled. It wasn't comforting. It was something deeper. Oh, you will, they said. Over and over. That's the point. You try one way, see how it feels, you try another. Eventually you get tired of certain flavors of regret. That's it, she asked. That's the purpose of all this? She gestured weakly at the shelves. Some kind of moral taste test? Said the clerk. That's one unflattering way to put it. Another is, you're learning to see yourself, all of yourself. Angles you once hated, angles you once worshipped, until the whole shape comes into view. Once you can look at the whole of what you are and not flinch, then we can talk about what's next. What's next? She repeated. Promotion, they said. We're always short on people who understand. Understand what? How to build better mazes. Nara sank onto the floor, back against a shelf, the wood cool through her coat. I answer phones, she said. I live in a small apartment. I get nervous ordering food if there's a line. I'm not. You've also been a midwife, a soldier, a potter, a poet, a person who invented a very obscure type of pulley that nobody remembers anymore, but which was extremely clever at the time, the clerk interrupted. You've been a whole parade of ordinary and extraordinary. Right now you're in a life where your main job is noticing, so notice. Notice what? She asked. How you treat people, they said, because the line between you and people is mostly a filing convenience. She looked up at the shelves. So, when I was in that alley, she began slowly. You were talking to yourself? The clerk said. A self who'd taken a different route through the maze, a route you'd already tried. You remembered how it hurt. You nudged yourself into a slightly less painful corridor. That sounds very neat when you say it like that, Nara muttered. They chuckled. The truth is never as neat as the explanation, they said. But you get the idea. She stared at Elias's box. At the other boxes, at the dizzying, impossible, terrible, beautiful implication of it all. If I'm all of them, she said slowly, then every time I was cruel to myself. Yes. And every time I was kind, you were practicing how to hold yourself without dropping any pieces, the clerk said. You're getting better, slowly, glacially, but better. She swallowed. This is too much, she said. Why are you telling me now? You hit a checkpoint, they said. You managed to override fear with memory in that alley. You trusted the tug on the string. That's one of the little flags we set. When enough of those go up, we bring you in for a status update. Can I stay? She asked. I don't know if I want to go back to pretending I'm just one person. You've never been just one person, the clerk said. And you won't be for a while yet, but no, you can't stay. You still have calls to answer, rent to pay, small kindnesses to perform. It's easy to be enlightened in a room full of labels and second chances. The trick is doing it when the printer jams and someone's yelling at you because their package is late. She winced. That doesn't sound very cosmic. That's where most of the important things happen, they said. In line at the grocery store, on bad commutes, in cramped apartments. She stared at them. I don't know if any of this is real. They shrugged. Does it feel truer than the story where you're just a little accident crawling around on a rock until you stop? If not, forget it. Go back to that one. No harm done. If yes, they spread their hands. Use it. How? The clerk slid off the desk. The floor shivered under Nara. The sorting room's edges were going soft, like a photograph being unfocused. Next time you look at someone, they said, assume you're bumping into another angle of yourself. You won't be entirely wrong. It might make you a fraction kinder. That's all the universe really runs on, accumulated fractions of kindness. That's the big secret, she asked. Fractions of kindness. That, and don't lick the heartbreaks, they said. Seriously, that stuff gets everywhere. The room was fading now. The shelves blurred into streaks of color. The air tasted like static. Wait, Nara said, do I get to remember this? Not clearly, the clerk said. You'd just start a cult and we have more than enough of those. You'll remember the feeling, the sense that when you hurt someone, something inside you winces in a familiar way. If you pay attention to that, you won't need perfect recall. And then? She asked. After all the lives, after all the mazes. The clerk's smile softened into something almost solemn. Then you help us take the walls down, they said. But let's get you through this section first. The floor rushed up. She woke with her cheek pressed to cold concrete. The alley smelled like rotting cardboard and damp concrete. Her scarf was half under her. Her knees ached. There was no sorting room, no clerk, no shelves. Just a man standing at the mouth of the alley watching her. "Hey," he said awkwardly. It was the mugger. His hoodie was zipped now. He looked smaller without the threat. "You okay?" he added. "I think so," she said, pushing herself up. "Did I pass out?" "You just folded," he said, frowning. "I was gonna run, but—" He shrugged. "You helped me. Didn't seem right." They looked at each other. Something inside her shifted, aligning. "I'm sorry," she said. He blinked. "For what?" "For every time I decided it was easier not to see you," she said. "In other places, other corridors." He looked at her like she was speaking in riddles. Maybe she was. "I'm sorry too," he said finally, "for almost making tonight another one of those stories people tell themselves about why they can't trust anyone." They shared a brief, strange, fragile smile. "Don't do it again," she said. "I'll try," he said. They parted. Life went on. The call center still buzzed. Bills still arrived with grim regularity. The bus was still late. Groceries still heavy. The world news still terrible more often than not. But Nara noticed more. When a woman yelled at her on the phone because a delivery had gone wrong, she pictured a box on a shelf with the woman's name on it. She imagined opening it and feeling the frazzled panic of a late birthday gift, the financial worry of wasted money, the old grief of all the birthdays that had gone badly. It didn't make the yelling pleasant, but it made it intelligible, a familiar echo instead of a personal attack. She spoke gently. When a co-worker lied and blamed her for a mistake, the old reflex, to snap back, to humiliate him in front of the team, rose in her like a tide. Behind it, another memory flickered. Standing in his skin in another era, being so terrified of disappointing people that lying had felt like the only air hole in a choking room, she still confronted him. But privately, kindly, letting him save face instead of grinding it into the carpet. It felt less satisfying in the moment, then a little better later. Slowly, she understood what the clerk had meant about flavors of regret. Some days she still snapped, still sulked, still chose cruelty that felt momentarily easier. But each time the wince inside her was sharper. Each time the idea that she was only ever hurting or helping someone else started to seem thin. It was like punching a mirror. All you really got was blood on your own knuckles. Once on the bus, a toddler dropped their toy and burst into inconsolable sobs. The child's mother looked so exhausted she might dissolve. Without thinking, Nara picked up the toy, made a funny face, and launched into the theme song from an old cartoon with a talking football. The toddler hiccuped mid-sob, then giggled. The mother mouthed "thank you" over the baby's head. Nara sat back, strangely full. She could almost hear the clerk's voice, faint and amused. Fractions of kindness. She didn't remember the sorting room clearly. If she tried to pin it down, it darted away like a dream remembered in the shower and lost by breakfast. But the feeling stayed, that everyone she met carried boxes somewhere with her name on them, full of stories she hadn't read yet or had read 1,000 times she lived. She answered phones. She loved, a little braver each time. She died eventually. Many years later in a bed that smelled like antiseptic and flowers, but that's another file in another warehouse. For now, there was just Nara, walking home on a Tuesday, pausing outside a convenience store as a cold wind bit at her fingers. A stranger brushed past her, murmuring an apology. Their eyes met for half a second. They both felt, very faintly, the odd sensation of running into someone they knew deeply, but could not place. They both smiled, just a fraction. It was enough to tilt something somewhere in a slightly kinder direction.